Hey, everybody, and welcome to this really exciting Valiant panel. I am so thrilled to have these wonderful guests with me today. My name is Emily Hecht. I'm Valiant's digital marketing manager, and I will be your host today. And let's just jump right into it. Lysa, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do with Valiant?
Hi, my name is Lysa Hawkins. I'm a senior editor over at Valiant. I work on such titles as Rye, Bloodshot, the upcoming Ninjak, Punk Mambo, Faith, etc., etc. And I love my job. I feel very blessed to be able to do it.
Well, we're really lucky to have you. We actually have a very writer-heavy panel today, which is really cool. 3 different wonderful writers who are working on ongoing or soon to be concluded Valiant projects. We've got, let's start with you, Dan.
Hi, my name's Dan Abnett. I am the writer on Rye for Valiant and a bunch of other stuff in other places. But Rye is the exciting thing for me to be doing, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Well, again, so happy to have you. I cannot wait to show off some more pages of the absolute visual insanity that we're going to get from Rye coming up. And, you know, one of the people who we see in Rye is Bloodshot. And speaking of Bloodshot, Mr. Tim Seeley, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I'm trying to figure out a good lighting thing that doesn't turn me all gothy.
I feel like that works for your vibe, though.
My brand. I'm wearing my Joy Division shirt so I can
Your Joy Division, exactly.
Perfect.
There we go. I don't know. We'll make it work somehow.
We'll figure it out. So, Tim, you write Bloodshot for us.
Yeah. Right before everything shut down, I had a whole bunch of issues finished up.
Yes, we will be seeing a couple pages from those. I'm really excited to show off some new stuff. And you recently also did our FCBD Bloodshot story, our Free Comic Book Day Bloodshot story.
Yeah, and I think that just came out last week, right?
Yeah, it did on the 22nd. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And it kind of ties to the movie, sort of, kind of. Yeah.
Some first appearances in the Valiant Universe of some movie characters. Yes, absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we've got Mr. Alejandro Arbona.
Last and least.
Come on. In that adorable B shirt, how could you ever be last? Or least?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alejandro Arbona, and I'm writing Dr. Tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna start off talking about, speaking of the movie character, we're gonna start off talking a little bit about Bloodshot. It's been a pretty wild year for the character. You know, had a movie come out in March, has had an ongoing series now for, gosh, we're coming up on issue number 8, I think is the next new issue. We've got a second printing of number 7 coming, but issue number 8 is coming soon. And I'd love to just start off by talking to Tim and Lysa, who's editing the book. What has it been like working on Bloodshot, on this sort of flagship Valiant character, this big action hero?
I enjoy it. I love every time I get a new issue of Bloodshot, a new script in from Tim. It's always so much fun because for sure there's going to be a moment that I just laugh out loud. There's just so much fun banter, the characterization. It's just nonstop energy and action. It's just fun. It's like popcorn candy to read it. It's wonderful. I love it.
Tim, I love the way that you describe your take on the character, because Bloodshot has had a couple different iterations. He's been, you know, a sort of a dark psychological horror military character. He's been this, you know, he's been deep in the South hunting serial killers. He's done all kinds of stuff, but I love the way that you talk about your take on the character. What do you feel like your version of Bloodshot is?
I mean, I think my version is kind of influenced by where we were, because we knew that the movie was coming out and we knew that it was a Vin Diesel action movie, and we kind of felt like, you know, we should lean into that. And I think the character my always pitch has been, he's G.I. Crow. You know, he's got all the sort of like badass zombie brought back for vengeance of the Crow, but he's got the G.I. Joe armament and the crazy vehicles and the weird sidekicks. So I kind of combine those together. I think, and you know, I wanted it to be, you know, something big and epic, and that's something anybody could pick up at any time. So, you know, that was kind of the approach, and obviously I love all the stuff that's come before, and I just knew it had to be something different than that. And I think I kind of combined like my love of weird horror stuff with kind of an 80s buddy action movie, and hopefully it works and puts him firmly in the Valiant universe as a guy who's sort of central. He's the most dangerous person there, and he's got to contend with that fact. And it would be much easier if he would just put himself in a box in the Marianas Trench and just not be around, but he has to keep going out there and trying to fix things, and he always makes it worse.
I kind of feel like your version of Bloodshot makes him he's less brooding, and he can just be a hero, the hero that he really always wanted to be. It frees him up. It frees him up to do that. He's got a lot of heart.
Yeah. I mean, if you could get blown up and come back from it, I don't know why you'd be brooding. I think you'd probably be kind of,
fair enough. Yeah.
You'd probably be kind of crazy because without that sort of, fear of imposing doom, you'd probably, but he has to worry about everyone else trying to take advantage of him and use him as a weapon. So he's always trying to head that off before it can happen to him, and make do, get, do something better than what's been done with him.
Yeah, I think for all three of the series that we have the writers for on today, one of the things that's really interesting is the way that you guys have played with the stakes for the character and sort of what is actually dangerous to them and what matters to them. So for Bloodshot, it's his stakes is not, oh, could I die or could the world end? It's, oh, could someone take control of me and use me as a weapon? And for Rye, there's this sort of huge scope of futuristic danger. And for Dr. Tomorrow, it's he is a danger to himself in a very different way. So I think that's really cool that we've got these series where they're sort of on the surface superhero stories, but the stakes are really unique and different for everybody. And I'm going to show a little page from Bloodshot right now, something we got coming up. And I would love, Tim, and Lysa, if you could just give us a little teaser of what this is all about from issue number 8, I believe.
I mean, that was part of the plan going in, that Lysa talked about very early, was that once we set him up as someone who was, a unique individual character, and you get to know him, then he had to be part of the rest of the Valiant universe. He's the character, that when the Valiant was brought back, he's the first character for that they did, but he's also very much a part of Valiant U. He's kind of the Captain America or the Superman of this universe. So. But on the other side, it's Valiant, so everybody is very untrustworthy of each other, and they all have different goals, and they bump into each other all the time. So, and X-O, I mean, it's basically Conan the Barbarian in Iron Man suit. And I love that, and I had to put him in here.
Yeah, it's really fun to see them interact because their energies are so different and their outlooks are so different. They're both tech guys in very different ways.
Yeah, definitely. But I think Arik is the kind of guy who, he's pushed into action by things outside him, and whereas Bloodshot is a guy that jumps into action.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, I'm gonna show off a couple more pages from issue 9.
Giant monsters.
Yeah, you got kaiju up in Bloodshot. Congratulations.
I mean, the stakes have to get bigger every time because he, like I said, he doesn't have to worry about dying. He has to worry about being used against other people. And one of the things you can use him for is to mind control Godzillas. So that is definitely something he has to worry about.
Where did that idea come from? Did you just want to put giant monsters and figure out a way, or did that come from something else? Because I would understand if that was the case.
Part of it was when we first started this, the idea was that this military organization called Black Bar had been around for a long time in the Valiant U, and one of the things that we kind of talked about was that maybe they had taken care of things that people had never seen in public. Maybe the reason you never saw giant stampeding monsters in Valiant Universe was just that Black Bar took care of it before they became a problem. So they have this, but instead of, like we kind of as a theme of the book, instead of throwing them away like you probably should, they kept them on ice in case they needed them, and then someone used it against them. So of course, giant kaiju.
Yeah, you've kind of given us this ability to mine a whole library of creatures we've never seen that are just hidden somewhere.
Yeah, and there's other, sort of 80s superhero guys that we never saw that were packed away, and a couple other just some zombie type characters from a sort of Shadowman kind of story that we never saw, and a whole bunch of stuff that I thought, the only reason you didn't see it was someone who's been stuffing that stuff in the closet.
Oh. This is one of my favorite pages, the punching a grenade into a kaiju's eye.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I mean, I don't have anything interesting to say. I just want us to all appreciate that this exists.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's that kind of book. It's blow up a giant monster's eyeball with a grenade kind of book.
Yeah. We actually have 3 different stories that all have some pretty epic fights in them. I'd love to take a break from talking about specific books for a second and talk to all 3 of our wonderful writers and Lysa. It can be hard, I would imagine, to write an action scene for a comic because it's such a visual thing. So figuring out how to script a fight scene, I can imagine would be a little more difficult or a little harder of a balance than scripting dialogue. How do you guys go about creating a more wordless scene, a more action-oriented scene? Dan, what about you?
I think it really depends. It really depends on what you're working on and who you're working with and how well you know that person. I think the temptation if you're not particularly familiar with the artist you're working with is to over script. I don't just mean in terms of dialogue. I mean literally choreograph and say, now we've got a low angle as this happens and he's lifting his foot 3 inches off the ground and this is, and try and as it were, the writer desperately trying to help the artist imagine what could be a very distinctive action sequence. And more often than not, that just makes an artist cry. And the flip side of that is the thing that so many writers do where they think they're being nice and they go, for the next 3 pages, they fight. And they just leave it at that, and again, the artist cries. So I think once you've got a relationship, essentially, and this applies to the rest of the script as well. If you know how much or how little script your artist likes, whether they like lots of detail they can pick apart, or whether they just like keep it very simple because they're going to expand upon it or whatever. And so weirdly, I noticed that actually weirdly the other day myself when I was comparing various scripts I've been writing for different things for Ryan, also from stuff for 2000 AD, and they don't look like they were written by the same person because the amount of panel description dialogue for each one was so different because they were all going to different artists I got to know and that they were sort of balanced and engineered that way. On Rye particularly, and obviously the action is very important. There are these huge explosions of action and then sort of very meditative conversations. But with that, it was a case of once I understood what Juan was going to be able to do with it, I sort of more describe the kind of tone of what I'm thinking it's going to be like, how fast so some of the visualizations of the incredible speed with which he operates, particularly in those early issues where he apparently isn't moving, but things are flying apart all around him. And knowing that it will come back either a brilliant version of what I've asked for or a brilliant version of something else that it didn't matter what I asked for because it's going to look so good. So I think having that relationship, the tricky one is when you're writing for somebody you don't know, and let's say you can just pitch too high or too low in terms of choreographing it. But I think like most writers, I do spend an awful lot of my time at my desk going as I imagine what's going to happen next and then try and translate that into some kind of script form.
Well, I can imagine, especially Alejandro, not to spoil too much, but I think we all know that Dr. Tomorrow is leading up to a Dr. Tomorrow v. Dr. Tomorrow knockdown, drag-out fight, which we'll see a panel from in a bit. What is it like choreographing something like that with Jim Toe, who's drawing Dr. Tomorrow, when it's really a one-on-one battle? What is your process for scripting something like that?
It is absolutely what Dan said. I agree with that completely. In the specific case of Dr. Tomorrow, I also had the benefit of the 2 characters are so similar, but they've gone in such divergent directions that we could pretty much dictate how the fight would go based on their different personalities. So for me writing, there's a fair amount of choreographing where I'm, telling Jim like, then this happens and this happens, but I'm also telling him, look, one of them is going to be really, really angry and quick to violence, and he's going to fly in head first, and the other one is more strategic, and he's going to hold back, and he's more thoughtful, and he's more self-composed. So as long as that's reflected in whatever happens, there's a lot there also for Jim to make choices of his own, you know, on like what beats work better on the page, and in a way that still reflects character.
Mm. And Tim, you've actually had to do this with 3 different artists recently. We've got this sort of awesome stable of Bloodshot artists. Do you find yourself adjusting for each one of them, for Jason Masters and Brett Booth and Mark Lamming?
I mean, I kind of treat it, that's exactly what Dan said, except I assume I'm not going to have the artist I wrote it for. So, so I just write them very specifically. But, you know, if someone wants to add, I always say you can add whatever you want, just don't take anything away. You know, so I assume a certain amount of flexibility in comics, especially action scenes. But I just try to include the things that I really need. For instance, I need Bloodshot to punch someone's eye out with a grenade. I need that to happen. If you want to add something else, go ahead. But just make sure that that beat is there, because, you know, it's obviously very important to continuity. Obviously, it's probably the most important Valiant event of the century. So
I feel like we need to rename this panel Valiant Bloodshot punches out a monster's eye with a grenade, and other
or
things.
Anybody, really. It could be anybody. It could be our eyes. We don't know. It's you know.
Yeah, I think especially with Bloodshot, you really get the feeling of these being blockbuster movies just on a page. Definitely. Do you see them in your head? And
they're, well, you know, I think the slam bang sort of action with not a lot of collateral damage is definitely like a good superhero thing that I love, and that's a Jack Kirby sort of staple. But I think Valiant characters get punched and they bleed, you know, and that's kind of it hurts, you know, and I think that's a little more like grounded, and I guess in a way I hate that word because that usually means it's going to be a boring movie, but but in this case I think it just sort of, the stakes, the physicality has impact, you know, it has real physical impact on the characters,
even if they can resurrect themselves afterwards.
Even if they can do that, yeah.
And we have one exclusive for this panel, one exciting new page that we want to show off from issue 10. So if Lisa, Tim, you want to give us a little teaser about what's coming up, and then we're gonna move and talk about Rye a little bit with Dan. Oh, look at that Brett Booth art.
Ah, yes. Okay, I needed a little reminder because it's been a bit. Let's see. Well, I think that this storyline picks up from the Free Comic Book Day / last Wednesday release. That it kind of picks up some characters that we saw in the movie, but adds them into a story where it's the story we kind of find out. Bloodshot finds out that there's somebody has something that he wants, a particular bad guy from his past, and it's going to lead him to running around the world trying to find these things before this particular bad guy. And we bring in Wilfred and a couple other characters from the film, and he kind of gets a new cast of sidekicks that drag him around. It definitely picks up from where we left off in the Burns story arc. So it all ties into one big thing that we've been building towards for issue 12.
I'm really excited that we're going to be seeing Wilfred Wiggins and KT, who we met in the Bloodshot movie, and we're now going to see them in comic book form in the Valiant Universe. That is very cool that we get to bring those in. Yeah,
and it definitely that part with X-O and all that sort of tying him back to the Valiant Universe is very important to this particular arc.
Awesome. And speaking of the very wide Valiant Universe, let's just travel, like, I don't know, a couple thousand years into the future. How do we feel about that? Want to visit New Japan and the ruins thereof with Rye?
Sure.
Dan, how is working on Rye been for you?
I think it's an absolute trope for a comic professional to come onto an interview and go, oh, well, of course, it's wonderful, and the artist is amazing, and we've been having a brilliant time. The editorial team couldn't be better, and it's been a fantastic choice. I find myself saying that a lot in the last few months as we've been talking about, right? But honestly, it's completely true. I just love writing this book, and I love working on it, and I love the art that it is generating, the look and the visual, the way. I think just from what was being said there, I agree completely. The Valiant Universe has got a very particular quality to it that is, and I'm not going to say grounded, but it's grounded, and there are consequences to things, and things hurt. Even small things hurt, even if you can come back from the dead. And I think the opportunity to try and create a future for that, as you say, 2,000 years in the future, that is both incredible and wonderful, which it should be in order to wow readers into reading it, but also has that same sense of authenticity that it is a real place. Has been an adventure, and I wasn't sure that I could pull it off. I was trying my best, and Lysa was being fantastic in terms of directing me and suggesting things that I should do. But it's when the art arrived that I went, oh look, that's how it works, and so it's been a joy to do.
Well, it's pretty fun to read too. I will say this has been fun for sort of longtime Valiant fans. For ride number 6, they might do a bit of a double take when they see pages like this, considering Juan Jose Rip, who's doing the art on Rye, also did art on Britannia. And I will admit, I did a bit of a double take when I saw this, and I thought, oh, is this a different book? So I love that you're bringing in this very old school aesthetic back into Rye. Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming up in this new arc?
Yeah,
it starts with number 6.
And the sort of guiding philosophy is something that Lysa said to me on sort of day one when she talked about doing this book, is the idea that this future Earth essentially has been left to its own devices for a very, very long time. It's sort of rewilded. It is almost anything that is possible there through either evolution or mutation or through technology, and so therefore it is this sort of cornucopia of weirdness that is waiting to be unlocked. And one of the things we tried to do with the first 5 issues is to show a variation, the number of different things. The first few issues are sort of standalone, so like it can be this, oh, it can also be this, it can be this, it can be this. So we've got sort of essentially positronic dinosaurs wandering around in one place, and we've got sort of small farming communities, and we've got ultra futuristic housing states that's still running after 2,000 years, and all this sort of stuff. And we're also mindful of the fact that when New Japan fell, all its different sections and sectors, sort of self-contained, contain cultures and technologies of their own. So one of the things we want to play with the arc moving forward from 6, which I have to say is I just love this stuff. I love this imagery. Is that there are going to be. I wanted to evoke a kind of. Well, you mentioned Britannia. I wanted to evoke that sense of the very, very furthest reaches of the Roman Empire. Towards the end of the Roman Empire thing. So sort of Hadrian's Wall, the sort of, beyond this you do not go, because only the darkness and horribleness lurks out there, and the sort of routine military life of people. But then to undercut that by going, and here's a robot samurai, and then to undercut that again by giving other explanations to what's going on. Yeah, this is. I mean, that's fantastic. We've got there is an element of sort of Conan versus Picts going on in this kind of storyline, but this is another example of Juanjo doing amazing things. So in the early issues where we wanted to show how fast Rye was, we did it by having him apparently not moving at all, and so things exploding around him. In this, he's gone for multiple images because it's happening so fast. So again, we're handling special effects in different sort of ways. But yeah, I sort of wanted to bring in a kind of otherworldly, weird with a Y strangeness, a sort of folk horror feeling to it, because we've done other things in the issue so far, and I'm going, well, there's room for this as well, but it's underscored with the kind of technological possibility that runs through Rye all the time as well. So quite often there's something very weird and folklorish, and it turns out that there's a technological explanation for it, and then sometimes the reverse. That's confused everybody.
I mean, I feel like this might be a pretty confusing place to live. I mean, it makes sense when you read it, but I think if I lived there, I would. Let's be real, I would die instantly. I wouldn't survive this.
No one would survive. That's the through line, though, of the story, because although you need to know a few things about the world of Rye in order to understand the setup. I mean, and they're easily summarized in a couple of sentences. The actual storyline itself is so simple. It is a guy on a quest to hunt down this thing that he's doing. He's got his kid robot buddy with him, and they have this double act, and they do this thing. So it's incredibly linear, picaresque story of this. So the intrigue and complexity and the fun of the book comes in all the weird things that happen to him whilst he's doing it, and that's the great thing. So you don't you don't need to have a PhD in the Valiant Universe in order to start reading Rye at any point, be it episode 1 or Fallen World, which led into it, or indeed issue 6, which is a great jump on point, because the premise is so simple. Go on a quest. And then everything else is kind of unfolds in front of you and is often being encountered for the first time by the main characters. So they are themselves explaining or trying to figure out what it is they're encountering in order to deal with it. So it's kind of have your cake and eat it sort of book, where it's really complicated, but it's also really simple. And the complexity is the fun rather than an obstacle to your reading enjoyment. That's my theory, and I'm sticking with it.
We've actually got 3 books here that have huge possibilities in what they're able to do. Rye, you can kind of go anywhere you want, find all these different genres. Bloodshot, it's, pick from your Rolodex of monsters, get what do we want Bloodshot to fight today? And with Dr. Tomorrow, you've got the whole Valiant Universe, you've got time travel, multiverse, so you kind of can go anywhere you want. Do you guys ever find it difficult to focus in or not go too wild and crazy? Lysa, do you ever have to rein these guys in?
Well, sometimes. Tim likes to go old school. And sometimes it's like, well, we just can't play with that toy. I'm sorry. I wish we could, because it would make it better, but we can't. So sometimes, but I don't like to. I think that these writers, they know what they're doing. They don't need me to rein them in. And if I have to say anything, it's usually, well, the pacing's a little off. Maybe we need to do this to tighten it up. That's it.
Yeah, I will say reading Rye, especially, even though it goes so wild, it doesn't ever lose that sense of simple storyline, which is nice, because it does go quite wild. It
does, yes. Yes, we. I think from issue 6, and what we're seeing here, is the point at which in issue 6 I'm sort of beginning to divide the narrative thread, so that it has very much been Rye and what he's up to now, and he's encountering people. So Lula, who we see here, or the Spylock, she's the mantle she's adopting now. He encounters her in the first 5 issues, and we get to find out what she's been doing since we last saw her. But from issue 6, I'm building a secondary storyline that we can cut between what Rye's doing and what Lula's doing, because what Lula's doing is in itself very, very important, ties into the big backstory. They're both essentially, in their completely different ways, trying to quest for a solution to the problem of Bloodfather, who is, of course, Bloodshot, or inhabiting the future Bloodshot's body, which is great, because that to me is another part of the connective tissue of building the Valiant Universe out into the future, is that here are some things you recognize. They are not in any way, shape or form the same things, but they're based in the same sort of way. So you feel a sort of familiarity, yet, and also an alienness and a strangeness. But she's trying to cure this, and because Lula and Spylock's whole thing is kind of virtual reality and cyberspace and all those things that are wonderful yet also huge cliches, I was struggling to think, this is what she would do and this is how she would do it, but are people just going to yawn when they read it and go, yes, we were doing this in 1987, Dan, stop it. But again, it was one of those things where it's like, let's give it to Juanjo and see what he can do with it, and I think he's doing extraordinary things, really, really extraordinary things. Just an awareness of more cutting edge technology, but then there's just this sort of phantasmagorical, psychedelic way that he's projecting this idea of a virtual reality. And it's not that kind of virtual reality holodeck where nothing is it's all faked and it's simulated. This is kind of a counter dimension where things are very real and extremely lethal, and they may not be solid in the 3D way that they are in the real world, but nevertheless there are consequences to things going terribly wrong in there. And I think that's great. I mean, that's amazing work.
Yeah, we've actually got a lovely little exclusive page to show you from issue 9. Speaking of that very dangerous virtual world,
yes,
just to whet your appetite a little bit there.
We're building. I don't want to spoil anything that we're doing, because there is a very strong storyline that Rye is following that introduces several new characters or does important things with them, and so the readers following that will think that is the meat and potatoes of what's happening there, and we're just catching up with Lula to see what she's doing. But she leads us also to a very, very important place. And one of the things with the second arc, like the first, is this opportunity to not only touch upon relics of the contemporary Valiant universe, so that we can show it and say, hey, this is still the same place, but to do it in really unexpected places. So I will go as far as to say we will meet some things, and people, I hope, will go, oh my God, really? After 2,000 years, that's amazing. But I don't want to spoil surprise more than that, because I think there's some great things and some great twists with it.
Alejandro, I know your answer to this question, since you used to be an editor at Valiant. But Dan and Tim, did you read a lot of Valiant before you started writing here, or was it a new entry into the universe for you when you started writing?
I did, and that's what gets me in trouble all the time, because I always bring back stuff that I can't use. I have a deep well of old Valiant knowledge that I'm always like, oh, and then this guy, and then I can't use them. So yeah, it gets me in trouble. But I read the 90s stuff. I was there for the Acclaim reboot, and then I was there when Valiant came back. Valiant Entertainment came back in 5-6 years ago. So I knew the stuff. This is one of the things I didn't have to research, which is nice.
You almost know too much, though.
I probably know too much. I definitely know too much about the Acclaim Bloodshot, where he was like a big gray zombie that would like grab cats and cows and stick them in his body. And then I love that stuff. It was so shocking. And they're like, that's not how it works anymore. But I keep thinking about it. So,
I mean, I'm just trying to think of ways we can get that into the book. Lysa, come on.
I don't know.
Cat absorption.
Like, whoa.
No, we have to stop there.
It's not sexy enough. Vin Diesel would have put cats in his body.
Moving on, Dan. What about you?
Yes and no. I actually was very familiar with sort of first generation Valiant, like Tim. Read a lot of that stuff, and in fact wrote some of it back in a long time ago, back in the early 1600s. I wrote stories on Shadowman and Ninjak.
I have your Ninjak over here.
There you go. And then, for various reasons, I was working in other places, and I think I tended to read comics because I was keeping up with the continuity of things I was working on. So I sort of missed out a lot. And when Lysa invited me back to work on Ryan Fallen World, I was delighted and also slightly embarrassed that I wasn't as au fait with recent continuity as I should be. But really, I needed a major refresher course. So I went away and read as much stuff as I could read, and I was getting sort of reading list recommendations. And Lysa was going, "You don't need to know that." And I go, "But yeah, I want to read it anyway." And to my horror, but also joy, I went, there has been so much great stuff that I just hadn't read, and just the comic reader, let alone the professional who needs to know the stuff in order to write for Valiant. But the comic reader was going, this stuff is great. So it was great. It was a really, really good excuse to go and read up on stuff. And I'm still learning, and I still every now and then make a fundamental error, which Lysa just quietly coughs. I go, I've done it again, haven't I? I've either remembered early continuity or I've just misunderstood something. But it is, as I say, I think it's incredibly appealing because by accident or design, but probably a bit of both. The Valiant universe, whilst it superficially resembles a classic superhero universe, of which there are several, your mileage may vary. It has a very distinct take in every respect in terms of how it works, how it operates. So all the component pieces you need to make a universe are there. They just function in different ways, and tonally they function in different ways. And I think that's the most exciting thing about it. Something can be very dramatic in the Valiant universe that wouldn't be dramatic in another big universe because it's a matter of contrast and contradiction. There are and I'm desperately trying not to mention their names, but in some of the bigger, older established universes, everything's been done so many times that something that is properly humanly dramatic is like, oh yeah, we saw that last week in whatever. We've seen that so many times. Whereas in Valiant, when it happens, quite often it is happening in the Valiant universe sort of the first time, and it's a big deal. It is a very, very big deal. And that, to me, lends even the most inhuman characters, Bloodshot and Rye included in that, because they really aren't, yet they very much are. They have much more personality because their interactions are more human. Human things that would matter to us matter to them too, and therefore the stories have greater resonance, in my opinion. And I think that's a very exciting thing to come on. It's not just a matter of like learning a universe and going, well, who's the Iron Man, who's the Cap, who's the what? You know, you've got to learn how those things are adjusted and tilted in really, really serious ways. And I think that makes for some fun things. So I guess the future world that I'm trying to build in Rye is not just one I would get off the peg in my head and go, oh, here's a future world, I can do this post-apocalypse, you've got it, it'll have a bit of this and a bit of that, because it has to be adjusted very sensitively to make it Valiant's future. Not literally specifically in terms of showing you things from the Valiant future, but feeling like the same, conveying that same feeling of danger and realism and consequence, I suppose. Wow, that was unnecessarily serious.
Well, and Alejandro, you have a really unique history with Valiant for someone who's writing a book for us, in that you were an editor here. Can you tell us a little bit about your history with Valiant and how it led to you writing Dr. Tomorrow?
Well, I mean, it all starts with Warren Simons. Warren Simons was the editor-in-chief when Valiant relaunched, and he and I had worked together previously at Marvel. He had been the person who pretty much recruited me into comics and trained me. So when Valiant relaunched, he started calling me to come back there, and I did that. I joined the team. I was editing there for I think about 3 years. But then ultimately writing was what I wanted to do. So I ended up leaving, and here I am now. Turned right around and started writing for Valiant.
So you helped build this universe that Dan and Tim and Lysa are talking about, and now you're back adding to it. That's really cool.
To the smallest degree. I contributed a pebble, perhaps, I think.
A very nice, wonderful, all ages, adorable pebble. How about that? I love, though, that you've been able to bring in, this is, I believe, a page from issue 3, that you, because there's this multiverse aspect to Dr. Tomorrow, a story about a boy who's growing up and meeting his older superhero self, and then finding out that, maybe that wasn't exactly what he pictured it would be. You've been able to bring in everybody.
Yeah, that was funny. Earlier you were talking about whether our editors are trying to rein us in and get us to keep things more intimate. For me, it was the opposite. I pitched this story, which is a very intimate, personal story, a coming-of-age thing for a boy. And my initial editor, when I pitched it, was Robert Myers. And he was like, hey, if the entire universe is in danger, we've got to go bigger here. We've got to bring in everybody. You've got to throw everything at this threat. So that was a lot of fun to actually be given license to open up the toy box and pick out who I wanted.
Yeah, and you've got and it's so much fun to watch Jim Toe draw everybody.
Yeah, he's really gotten to crack his knuckles and do whatever like he, in one interview that I read, he said that he was particularly fond of Punk Mambo, and that's why Punk Mambo turns up so many times. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I noticed that she's front and center in every crowd shot and everything. So yeah, he's really getting to have fun with the characters that he wanted to draw the most.
Nice. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about Dr. Tomorrow? It's, we've been talking about the Valiant Universe, and it's very, again, none of us like the word, but we're going to keep using it, grounded. And things hurt and things are serious and people die and stay dead. But you've actually been able to bring sort of a lighter side to this with Dr. Tomorrow, which has really been more of an all ages book, a younger story, not a less serious or less impactful story, but a story that's sort of a little less bloody, a little more open to younger readers. Was that your intention from the beginning, or was that how it developed as it went on?
It sort of was and it wasn't. It was definitely both Valiant and I wanted to do a really sort of aspirational, morally upright kind of, good-hearted superhero, which weirdly the Valiant Universe, except for Faith, has never, or maybe Quantum as well, has never really had. But even Faith, I mean, I love Faith, but even Faith is not really an aspirational superhero because she's so much like one of us. She is like a Spider-Man more than a Superman. She's a character that you identify with, not a character that you would look up to and think, I could never be like that. It's the opposite. You can see yourself in Faith's shoes. When Valiant and I started talking about this pitch, we were really sort of trying to come up with a way to create an aspirational Silver Age kind of, larger than life character. But aside from that, I've just been so, this comic is really odd and it's really weird. And of course I'm the writer, so I mean that in a good way. But I'm so grateful to Valiant for taking this weird chance on this comic. I pitched Valiant on what was essentially a big bait and switch. And it's gonna take more than half of the series to even get to the big surprise. The surprise being that it's essentially a coming of age story about a boy dealing with his own issues, learning to handle his anger, learning to grow into the man that he wants to become, which is essentially what the whole story is about. It's like, if you could, so many of us spend our whole lives thinking, I'm never going to be like my dad. And then one day you realize, oh, I'm exactly like my dad, or maybe you admire your dad and you want to be like that person. But the surprise twist in this comic was, if you could see the person that you're going to become as an adult, would you like it? Would you wish to be like that person? And in the case of our protagonist, Bart, he meets Dr. Tomorrow and he thinks at first, wow, this is a superhero. I'm going to grow up to be a superhero. And little by little, he starts to realize, like, actually, no, this isn't a good guy. I don't want to be like this person. And then what steps is he able to take to change that? How is he going to avert that destiny? And the universe happens to be in the balance, so he better get it right.
Slightly higher stakes than most people's am I going to become like my dad situations. Yeah. We've got a couple pages from issue 4, which is, I believe, just came out recently. Sort of seeing the results.
Without spoilers, but I think at this point we may as well just go off. And at the end of issue 3,
we'll put a timestamp in the description if you want to skip the real big spoilers.
Yeah, at the end of issue 3, we gave the impression that Bart, a 15-year-old boy, was killed, or that may or may not have been the case. But then a surprise character turned up at the end who was another Dr. Tomorrow. And so this page from issue 4 is going to show what happens in the interim. And it turns out that he lived. He merely fled to another universe, a parallel universe. And what's going to happen between him and that other guy coming back later? Is that him grown up? Does he go find another Dr. Tomorrow somewhere else? We don't know yet.
You did one of my absolute favorite things in the world from any medium, which is a montage sequence, a training montage. Yeah. I'm just going to put that up on the screen for a second. Speaking of, 80s action movies, we have like a total old school hero training montage.
This is a sequence where I basically said, let's give this a try. And I put it in Jim's hands to pull it off. But I was nervous. I didn't know if we could pull off a montage, because you think of a montage as a trope of movies and TV, but it relies on music and the cutting between shots. You have to simulate the passage of time in ways that work in visual in a cinematic medium or a televisual medium, but it might be harder in comics. So I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to pull this off. But look at that, Jim pulled it off. It works.
Yeah, total hero shot right at the end. I love it. And we will tease, of course, we wouldn't leave our fans without an exclusive teaser. We got a page from issue 5.
Dr. Tomorrow versus Dr. Tomorrow. Yeah, so this is what I was saying earlier. When these two finally meet face to face, it's the again, the bait and switch aspect. Earlier in the series, the series starts off with, you've got a sidekick, you've got a superhero, you've got a supervillain. The universe is in the balance. It's exactly what you would expect from a superhero comic. And then this total bait and switch comes along where the supervillain turns out to not be a player in the ending of the story at all. He catalyzed the story, he caused it to happen, but then he's off the board. And in the end, it is our original Dr. Tomorrow and this new character finally meet face to face in the big climactic final issue. And to the earlier choreographing this action, I basically said to Jim, look, the one guy is going to be extremely violent and the other guy is going to be extremely thoughtful and strategic. How do they bounce off each other? And here they go.
Nice. Well, I'm really excited for issue 5. It's it's definitely been like a really tight arc, even with all these characters, even with all this time jumping. It's been really fun to see. I actually have not let myself finish reading the script for issue 5 yet because I wanna be surprised.
This may sound cruel of me, but if I can make people cry with this issue, I'll be very happy. I'm trying to make people cry.
I mean, hey, a reaction that strong, I think that's always a medal of honor for a writer.
We can only hope.
Yeah. Dan, do you think you've ever written an issue that makes people cry?
I mean, I hope so. I try to write. I write comics try to make Dan cry. They always all my comics just yell at Dan. They're just like, you ruined my childhood by that one story you wrote, and then Dan cries, and then I'm happy. So
I didn't know there was this tension between your writers, Lysa.
Yeah.
You gotta get a handle on it.
That's good writing right there. That's the big review.
I had a kaiju. He was a family pet. One day.
There's a thing I was deliberately going for with this comic, which is that I think so much of superhero comic book tropes are about fathers and sons, especially when so many of the heroes are male to begin with. So there's a lot of like issues of masculinity and toxic masculinity and fathers and sons and all of that kind of thing. And so many superhero characters have father issues. Like just look at Iron Man or whoever, they all have these daddy issues and everything. So with this comic, I was deliberately trying to bring readers along through a minefield of your role model, the person you try to emulate, the person you're trying to grow into. There's also literally a father. Bart has a conversation on the phone with his father in the first issue. We're going to see how that winds up, how that subplot gets resolved in the final issue. So yeah, there's a lot of parental relationships, mothers, fathers, sons, that I was trying to play with in this comic.
Yeah, that is so true. The value.
The last thing you would expect, I think, from a comic book. No, hopefully that traffic gets resolved. To be the last thing you would expect when the first issue is like, here's a supervillain and the universe is going to be destroyed. Hopefully you would never expect that would lead to, fathers and sons tearfully hugging at the end, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. That's so nice. I'm so excited for all these books, and I cannot wait for Valiant fans to see them. We've got a couple more teasers and a couple quick fun questions, and then we will let you all get back to your days and hopefully writing more Valiant comics. I don't know. But we've got one little teaser for you from the upcoming X-O #2. Feel free to ooh and ah appropriately. Ooh. Speaking of giant fight sequences, yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot more X-O, not just in the pages of Bloodshot, but in his own book as well, which will be coming back soon. And we have a couple of sort of silly questions for you guys that I would love to hear. Since we can't have a Q&A with an audience, I'll be the audience. Who would win in a fight, Bloodshot, Rye, or Dr. Tomorrow?
It seems like Rye, right? I mean, he's the advanced form of Bloodshot.
I think it depends whose book it happens in, doesn't it?
That's true. It's definitely not Dr. Tomorrow. I'm sorry.
I'm the first one to say
Dr. Tomorrow.
When that bell sounds, Dr. Tomorrow is gonna be like, whoa, let's talk.
Oh no, yeah. Oh, that kid's done.
Yeah, he's fried. Yeah.
Oh, poor kid.
But that is maybe a question, in all seriousness, that I end up answering because of course, Father, the All-Father, is occupying the body of Bloodshot. So sooner or later, Ryan Bloodshot or a version of Bloodshot are going to come face to face, and it ain't going to be pretty.
Well, you've already done Eternal Warrior versus Rye in Rye, which is
I didn't have
cool.
one either for anybody.
This was actually a much more peaceful answer than I thought. Everyone just knows it's probably Rye.
Who wins in the fight? The readers.
That's
and speaking of the wide variety of Valiant characters, who is a Valiant character that you have not gotten a chance to play with yet that you would want to? I'll start with Alejandro.
I mean, these fight scenes in Dr. Tomorrow already featured virtually everybody. It's funny there were even characters in there who didn't make it to the final version that saw print, just because of the nature of things in the universe moving and changing. But yeah, in the first issue of Dr. Tomorrow, we see a fight take place in an alternate universe. So there are even Valiant characters there who aren't part of the Valiant universe, like Jack Rapid.
Yeah, you got some alternate Valiant characters in there. Definitely, there were the longtime fans were very excited to see them.
Deep cuts, yeah.
So maybe you'd want to bring some of those back in some way, or play with an alternate version of the universe.
There are definitely characters in there that I would love to get a chance at in the future, but who knows? We'll see how everything shakes out.
Yeah. Tim, what about you? Who would you want to play with who you haven't?
Archer and Armstrong for sure. Because I think I'm better at the funny stuff or the scary stuff. That seems to be my area. So they're hilarious, and I loved that book when it was originally introduced, and I loved it when Fred Van Lente was writing it. So those are great characters. I like them a lot.
Dan, what about you?
I think X-O always has a great appeal, just because it's such a cool character. But I have to say, to me, it is the opportunity of having a go at characters who fall into it. So, for instance, Punk Mambo or Shadowman, because of the way the occult works in the Valiant universe, is you do different stories than you would do with occult related characters in other universes. And I've also always found Ninjak appealing because it was a character I did write a long time ago, but it's kind of not the same. And so I'd sort of like to see what Ninjak could do these days. You know, how different it would be to write that. But to be honest, to me, the question is try and find one that wouldn't be interesting to write. And I think that's difficult.
Well, there you go. Lysa, what about you? Who I know there's things you can't talk about yet.
There are a lot of things I can't
Let's just
talk
pretend
about.
that nothing that hasn't been announced exists, and just go from there.
Britannia. I'd like to do Britannia.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and you've gotten to play with that a little bit. That aesthetic in Rye.
Yes,
So,
yes. I do. You know, my history degree just cries for it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been seeing this thing going around the internet lately of if you were going to write a story based on your weird area of expertise, what kind of story would it be? Do you guys have any sort of weird, deep wells of knowledge that you haven't gotten to put in any books yet?
Mine is Master of the Universe, and I got to write it. So actually, so did Dan. But
there you go.
But I know everything about He-Man, and it totally helped out when I wrote those 2 Master of the Universe series. So
Perfect.
I honestly don't see a comic company going for the superhero adventures of T.S. Eliot, to be honest, which is what I wrote my master's in. So,
Man, I'd read it.
Somehow I'll try and wrangle that around.
I mean, Alan Moore got to do a whole H.P. Lovecraft comic.
Exactly, yeah. In a wasteland of fire and ice. I'm pitching it now. It's
I never.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone would read my Samuel Beckett comic.
Yeah. Long pauses in that as well.
Oh yeah, it's one tree. Never sarcastic again. Oh no. Alejandro, what about you?
I have a weird amount of knowledge about bees, but I don't know. I don't know where I would ever be able to put that. I also know a lot about Chupacabra, but we've already seen them in Quantum and Woody, so they're
Perfect.
all the Valiant Universe, canonically.
I love it. I mean, I would read all of these comics, just so you all know. Where can people find your wonderful selves on the internet if they want to follow what you're doing and hear more about what you're up to? And what anything you'd like to plug, feel free. Alejandro, what about you? Where can we find you on the internet?
I'm primarily on Twitter. It's not always a child-friendly timeline, but I'm Alejandro Bot, like my first name with robot at the end. Alejandro Bot on Twitter. I mean, we've got the Dr. Tomorrow trade coming up later this year. I really, really hope if people haven't read the comic, I think it'll actually read better, all straight shot all the way through. So I really hope people will pick that up and check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put up some scheduling stuff at the end of this and make sure everyone has got those dates going forward. Tim, where can we find you to hear about what you're up to?
I'm on Instagram at Tim Seeley and on Twitter at @HackinTimSeeley, and I'm easy to find on the internet.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of cool stuff coming up. Bloodshot, heavy metal.
Yeah, too much. That's why I couldn't remember what I wrote in Bloodshot, because I think I've written like 23 scripts since that last one. So yeah, they're all blown together.
That was a long time ago. It was a long time ago that we read that script and you wrote that script.
It was a long time ago, yeah.
So find Tim online to hear the encyclopedic list of things he's working on.
Big pile of stuff.
Yeah. Dan, what about you?
I'm recently on Instagram. I'm Dabnett, D Abnett on Instagram, and I promise faithfully to post more things on there. I am on Twitter, but I very seldom look at Twitter anymore because I have a kind of Twitter allergy at the moment. It's just I find it a fairly frightening place. But I run 2 Facebook pages, Dan Abnett and Daniel Abnett, which I've been doing for years and years and years. And I know it's not the ideal way of reaching out because both of them are I had a page, I filled it up with friends. So I had another page and I'm now filling that out with friends. So very, very shortly, I'm going to convert one of them into the dreaded sort of fan page, public figure page, so I can have no limit to the people who can come and talk to me. But I maintain them as pages. And even if there isn't room to friend, if you send me a message, I check the messages and I try and answer people and talk to people that way. So yeah. And plugging, I've spent a lot of lockdown wearing my other hat as a Warhammer novelist. My new ridiculously explosive Warhammer novel Saturnine, which comes out I think this week, which is a big deal for those of you who know about the Warhammer 40,000 universe and the Siege of Terror and stuff like that. And I would, because it's free, I would point you to in the direction of a thing called Crater. That's Crayta. It's a game being developed by a British publisher. It's on Google Stadia. It's a game where you make games. It's a fantastic, innovative thing. And they asked me last year to write a comic, basically creating a context for it, a science fiction context for it. And that is now coming out, 6 issues. It is a sort of futuristic science fiction techno thriller. It's really good fun, and it's available on the Crater site for free. You can just go and download it digitally. And we wanted it to be a good comic in its own right, a good standalone comic. You don't even need to know the game. So go look at that, and there's free stuff for you to look at.
Oh, cool. Lysa, is there a way that people can get in touch with you online, or should they just reach out through Valiant?
Well, Valiant's always the best way to reach out to me, but I am on Facebook as well, so you can always reach out to me. If you send a message, I will respond.
And I'm going to put up one more fun exclusive for you all while we do the Valiant social media plugs. Speaking of Ninjak, as we have been a bit, we recently announced a new Ninjak series written by Jeff Parker with art by Javier Pulido. So here is a brand new page from that.
Oh man, so good.
It's so cool.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a completely different style. We're really excited. So if you want to know more about what Valiant has coming up, we have a lot of really cool books by Tim and Alejandro and Dan and some other people as well. And you can follow us on Twitter at Valiant Comics, Instagram at Valiant Entertainment, and Facebook at Valiant Comics. And we're on YouTube and Spotify as well. So thank you guys so much for being here with us. We could not be happier to have your books as part of the Valiant Universe and have yourselves as part of the Valiant family. So thanks to everyone watching. Come talk to us about comics and stay Valiant.